UFTV is your university and community TV station.
Well, and this community, Hancock County, Ohio, if you think about it, has truly a phenomenal history behind it. And it doesn't matter if it's the glass industry, the gas boom days, the military history, automobiles. I mean, it's got an amazing history. And one of the best parts of the military history was back in the Civil War days, 1861 through 1865. Some of the very first Congressional Medal recipients in American history were actually from Hancock County. It seems like a million years ago, really, but when you think about the Civil War, 155 years ago really isn't that long ago if you think about it. To these men in this area, they were doing what they felt was right. The Civil War had a thousand different reasons for it, but one of the most important things that these men, next to their families and the Bible, during the time they were engaged, were the battle flags. People don't realize the significance, both Union and Confederate, what these flags meant, and what they did to honor and protect them. We're very blessed to have two original battle flags here at the museum, but the one behind us really has an amazing history. These are extremely rare. Most of the flags after the war were turned in, and they're now stored in Columbus. But the two flags that we have here really are in amazing condition, and they're very, very early 1861 flags. Years ago, the flags that were turned into Columbus were sprayed with a material to preserve them, but what it actually did is it's deteriorating them. So when I see these flags and what we have, they're truly probably 99% better than most of the flags that were turned into Columbus after the war. What's unique about this 34-star flag is that you'll see it says 21st Regiment OVM. The end has been trimmed off, but it stood for Ohio Volunteer Militia, because when the Civil War first started, nobody had assumed that it was going to last for years and years and years. Most of the men who signed up in the early war, they only signed up for a term of like 90 days. Yeah, I mean, Americans fighting Americans in real world, it can't last but a couple months anyway. So those early militia units, that's where the OVM comes from. Okay, what was unique about this particular flag, and it's an early flag, 1861, is that it was actually, when we acquired it here at the museum, it was sewn inside of a quilt. And it had originally been passed down, but it was part of the Cusick family who had this in their possession. A lot of these early flags, since the war was only, they figured, maybe going to last about 90 days, the men signed up for a term of 90 days, and at the end of the term, they came back to their local communities where the flags were presented, and they had no choice but to turn the flags back in. That's probably the only reason that this flag survived. Now, what's unique about this particular one, it says on the red stripe, "Don't give up the ship." And realizing the 21st Ohio is an infantry division, it says 21st Regiment OVM, which stood for Ohio Volunteer Militia at that time frame. And I'm thinking, why would this have something to do with ships on an infantry? Well, years later, in doing some research, we had found some newspaper clippings from the north, or up in Perrysburg, I guess you would say, Perrysburg, Ohio, and it said that they had presented their men with a beautiful banner, and we had painted on it "Don't Give Up the Ship," which was honoring Admiral Perry from the War of 1812 up at Lake Erie. And what's really, really unique about this flag, the lady who presented the colors to their men, her name was Mrs. Roach. And she had the honor of stating that her grandfather had carried in the Revolutionary War the flag at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And what was unique is she said that the original tassels that hung off of this flag were tassels that were carried in the Revolutionary War at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Now, we have no idea whatever happened to those, but this is an extremely rare flag. Now, you will notice that a lot of the stars have disintegrated, realizing that this banner is made out of silk, and a lot of the paint that would have been painted on there has actually disintegrated. You will also see where corners or maybe stars have been cut out over the years. A lot of the veterans, especially during the early reunions, they might have wanted to have a piece of that flag, and they took it and cut it out for a souvenir. But an extremely rare flag. The flags for both the Union and Confederate were probably one of the most significant things that they had. It was the greatest honor to carry a flag, but on the other side of the coin, if you were the man carrying the flag, probably you were one of the first to be shot and killed. The reason that these flags are so large, and they vary in sizes, but let's say that you have 100 men in a company. You would place the flag right in the center of those 100 men. And this way, as you are proceeding or marching forward, if you got disoriented because of the battle or cannon fire or the obstacles, the woods, whatever you were going through, you could always either look right or left, and you could look and see your flag, and you knew exactly where to line up. The reason they were so large is just so the guys could see where it was. Now, realizing in a battle situation where you've got cannon fire, you've got thousands and thousands of rifles going off, and you've got the bad things of war taking place, they didn't have walkie-talkies, they didn't have microphones, and the officers literally, after yelling for 20 minutes at the top of their lungs trying to organize these men, they would have become hoarse. So those flags were extremely important, so the men knew exactly where to line up. And the greatest honor was to carry that flag, but probably one of the greatest things that was looked down upon is if your colors were actually captured. During the Civil War, most of the early Congressional Medal recipients actually earned those medals because they were able to capture enemy colors, I guess you would say. Okay, the second flag that is here at the museum that we feel is an original battle flag is this one right here. Now, when we had originally found this one, it had been rolled up, and the side over here was the side that was visual, and from it flapping in the wind during all those battles and such, it was tattered extremely bad. So as we were unfolding it and unfurling it, we got through the tattered part, and it just got bigger and better and better. And then we came to the star configuration, and you'll see this is also an early 34 star flag, 1861. But what makes this extremely rare is the star configuration is actually shaped in a star. Down on the lower bottom here was a little teeny cardboard tag that was attached to it that said this was Colonel James Niebling's original battle flag from the 21st Ohio. Now, we've never found where this presentation had taken place, but we have no doubt that James Niebling did own this flag. He was a prominent citizen in the community before the war. He was a Mexican war veteran, and he was the sheriff before the war take place. And obviously, when they started looking for 75,000 volunteers after Abraham Lincoln did that plea, it would only make sense that a war veteran in a prominent position like James Niebling had, he was the perfect candidate to lead the 21st Ohio. But extremely rare, something you will not get an opportunity to see too many of these in American history, and we're blessed to have it here at the Hancock Historical Museum. Okay, now one thing that people don't realize when it comes to restoration of flags is the process that's involved, and what to actually create these to be on the wall here in Findlay, Ohio at the Historical Museum is a long and drawn out process. You've always heard the term that silk always goes back to ground after years and years. Well, if you can imagine this material that was hand sewn back in the day and realizing it's 150 some years old today, if you can imagine a piece of tissue paper and then you separate the laminates to make it as skinny as possible and then create that to be brittle, that's what this flag is like today. So what we have to do to restore and preserve is not only the lighting can damage it, but you also have to create a skeleton for the flag. So years ago when we found these flags, we started a fundraiser and we had raised $30-some thousand to put these behind glass just so you could physically see them. But if you just tried to hang it up and laminate it between the glass over time, that skeleton support system would just start falling apart. So to make this easy to understand, this flag is actually sewn inside of what we will call a clear cloth skeleton. And each piece is sewn to that skeleton to create support, I guess you would say. So when we see these flags, there's a lot of history behind them, but there's also a lot of preservation behind them. And the detail of this flag is just amazing. I tell kids when they come here for a program, they're used to seeing that red, white, and blue piece of cloth raised up in front of their school, but they don't realize the importance of this flag and the men that died trying to preserve this flag. So when you see that flag going up and down in front of your school, don't think of just a red, white, and blue piece of material. Think of the thousands and thousands upon thousands of men that died to honor this flag for what America is today. It's something, when you start thinking about that and reading the stories, it's something you will never, ever forget.